my colleague Joe Madison, who hosts a program from 6 to 10 a.m. on SiriusXM Urban View, right here on the same network, but just down one click down on the channel line, has not only have Joe and Sherry introduced Louise and I to some of the coolest restaurants in Washington, D.C., not only have we traveled the world together, but this is a guy who has just an amazing life story, and he's got a new book out. It's basically an autobiography. It's called Radioactive by Joe Madison, the great Joe Madison. Joe, welcome back to the program. It's always so great to have you with us.
Don, I have one question before we get started. I have always wanted to ask you this question.
Okay.
The music for your opening.
Right.
Where did that come from?
Back years ago, there was an activist by the name of Jack Riley, who was good friends of mine. He published a newsletter called Germany Alert about the rise of fascism in Germany. And his partner was a guy named Jens Mueller, who was a German who lived in East Berlin, who was a musician. And when we started the show in 2003, I needed music that I didn't have to pay somebody for. And I was commiserating with Jack about it. Jack had been the producer for the Beach Boys and had been the producer for Prince. And a long story there, but so Jack said, well, Jay can do it. Jens Mueller, he went by the stage name of Jay, just the letter J. And so Jay wrote that, produced it, did it, performed it himself, and gave it to us with all rights. That's where the music came from.
I always wanted to know that because it's you. I mean, I don't care where you are in the car, wherever, and you hear it. Oh, here comes Thom. Thank you. That answers the question, and now the world knows. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, thanks, Joe. So, Joe Madison, You got a new book out. It's called Radioactive, a memoir of democracy in action on the air and in the streets. And there are so many great stories in here. I'd like to start, though, with why you weren't on our show yesterday. You were over at the White House?
Initially, Steny Hoyer, who asked if I would come to the Capitol, and he said that we're going to sign the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. And so I thought it was going to be a bill signing by the president. Well, what it turned out to be, and something I wasn't aware of, they have what they call the enrollment signing. The enrollment signing. And that's where the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has an event with several members of Congress who sponsored the bill and were key in getting it passed, where she signs it. Mm-hmm. And it's set up just like it's the president signing it, but the Speaker of the House signs it first.
And then they kick it over to the White House.
That's right. So they call it enrollment signing. Mm-hmm. And they don't do it, you can imagine, Thom, they don't do it for every bill because there's hundreds of bills. But this one was very special because, as you know, and we've all worked in coalition to pull this off, it took over 100 years and 250 tries by the United States Congress to get a bill, an anti-lynching bill passed. And she wanted to make it a very special occasion. And then Steny Hoyer asked if I would join them. So I had the pleasure of being with Bobby Rush, who's retiring from Chicago. He is the one who sponsored the bill, and then Benny Thompson came in, and also Joyce Beatty, who is the head of the Congressional Black Caucus. She was there along with Steny Hoyer.
Yeah. You sent me a picture of it. It looked great, and it's just what an honor. I mean, talk about the anti-lynching bill and the background of this. Why is it that it took us over 100 years to get this piece of legislation signed?
Well, as you can imagine, you think about 100 years ago, there'd be no way that Dixiecrats would sign it. They would have, when they lynched people, oftentimes they'd have picnics. And I'm not kidding. They would have picnics and and you've seen these photographs. There's a museum that is dedicated to those lives, thousands of people whose lives were lynched, black, white, otherwise. They would have picnics. They would actually sell body parts from the lynching victims. And then, of course, Emmett Till was because Bobby Rush represents the district that Emmett Till and his mother lived in. But it was just something that they just could not get enough votes 100 years for. I mean, you have to understand, we know what America's been like for the past 100 years. But here's the good news. The bill passed in the House by all but 3 votes. And, you can look, I don't have the names right now. One Congress Republican was from Texas. I forget the names. I have them written down here. And then in the Senate, they kept passing it. They kept passing on it. And the person who initially objected was Rand Paul from Kentucky.
Oh, what a shock! And
it could have passed. It could have passed last year when Bobby Rush introduced it, but he objected, and we have on so that it finally passed unanimously in the Senate. It passed unanimously in the Senate, and so now it goes to the president for his signature, and I'm hoping. And I know Steny Hoyer is pushing for this, that the president will have a bill signing ceremony. And Tom and everybody, I hope he does. Mm-hmm. But as Nancy Pelosi pointed out, it should never have taken 100 years for this to become law. So in essence, it federally makes lynching a hate crime. Mm-hmm. So imagine if those insurrectionists on January 6th had successfully lynched the vice president, Pence, at that time, and there had been an anti-lynching law, they would have been charged based on this federal law.
With a federal crime. Fascinating. Joe, your story of growing up in Dayton and this whole kind of being introduced to the idea of blockbusting. This was so personal, so very real for you. It's something that you and I are about the same age. For me at that time, it was kind of an abstract concept. Can tell us about that? Tell us your story about that.
The story was a mortician. His name Clarence Bowman, who was, because in those days, morticians, doctors, maybe lawyers, they were the folks who, had successful businesses. But Clarence Bowman was a family friend and a friend of the family, and he moved into a predominantly white neighborhood. He was the first black family to move into this neighborhood, and he was interviewed about it. And one of the things he said was, "I don't want any black person to move on the same block with me. I want and so black people in the community got angry with him, like he was some kind of snob. Like, mm-hmm. What are you talking about?" And he went on to explain it. He said, "No, move on the next block, and then and the next family move on a block over." Because what they did in those days, we don't talk about it now, but they had something called blockbusting. So what would happen? Real estate agents would would sell to families that moved into black families that moved into the neighborhood, and they would move them all on the same block. Then they would call white families and their neighbors and say, you might want to sell now because black people are moving into your neighborhood.
Yeah. And
the value of your home will go down. And so what he was saying was, don't let that happen, because that's nothing more than blockbusting. And so I always remember that was true. That happened.
Yeah. I remember in 1981 when we moved from New Hampshire down to Atlanta, Georgia, and Louise went down alone to meet a real estate agent, and the real estate agent's first question was, do you want a mixed neighborhood or an all-white neighborhood? And Louise's answer was, I want a different real estate agent. I mean,
and there you go.
Honest to God, true story.
I think in the book, Tom, when I moved from Dayton to Detroit, we moved into a quote unquote mixed neighborhood. But, this was in the mid '70s, right? And we had two white neighbors on each side of us.
Yeah, that is in the book.
And so we started getting calls after we moved in with the real estate agent who said, you got black folks moving into your neighborhood. Would you like to sell?
I thought it was funny how you played them along, too. You tell that story in the book. It's brilliant. The host of the Joe Madison program, The Joe Madison Show on SiriusXM, channel 126, 6 to 10 a.m., human rights and civil rights activist, author of the new book, Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy in action on the air and in the streets. Joe, you and I, you've been to Sudan, South Sudan, a number of times, you and Sherry. My son and I joined you guys, along with Ellen Ratner and a few other people, on one of those trips, which was just, mind-boggling, eye-opening to me. But in your book, you not only tell the story of that, and thanks for, for mentioning that I was there with you, but you also talk about how you kind of got into a kerfuffle with the Nation of Islam about this. Tell us about this. Well,
they were, in essence, supporting the Sudan government. And, of course, the war between the rebels in southern Sudan, which they were seeking independence, as you now know, South Sudan is the newest and youngest country, and so the Nation of Islam actually really was very angry with anybody who supported the rebels and the independent effort of then southern Sudan. Yeah. And it is what it is. One of the people who did go, also he didn't travel with us, was Al Sharpton. I asked Al Sharpton if he would go and see, like you and other talk personalities and people who had a media platform, and Al did go. And boy, they went after Al. They went after me. I can tell you that the government of Sudan had actually had wanted us dead or alive. There were actually there were flyers put up. The other person who went, and I can always thank him, was former Congressman Walter Fauntroy. Mm-hmm. And man, we started, seeing what they call, I guess, wanted posters, dead or alive, on the internet. Yeah, that was very very real.
That was a wild ride.
But it's very real.
Yeah, yeah, and
I'm not. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't the Nation of Islam that put out it. This was the government of Sudan.
Yeah, Bashir was his name, right?
Bashir's people, absolutely. This was them. Yeah.
Yeah. You also talk in the book about the CIA and, Gary Webb's research into the whole crack epidemic thing and how that ties back into Iran-Contra and your role in basically talking about this to an America that had no idea. You want to riff on that a little bit?
Well, real quick, you remember when the story came out, when the Mercury News, the San Jose Mercury News.
Yep.
And it was a series that Gary did. And I picked it up. I was working for another talk station in D.C. And I said, this is crazy. And I remember quickly calling a lot of people. We got to do something about this. We got to talk about this. The one person, God, do I miss him, was Dick Gregory. Mm-hmm. And Dick Gregory, I called Dick, and Dick said, look, I'll be there tomorrow. He got on a plane. He actually flew. He read it. I guess he read it while on the plane or whatever. And then he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to protest. We're going to picket the CIA. And this went on. And I talked about this whole CIA, Contra, crack cocaine epidemic that was going on at the time. I even had a debate with Ollie North, and Larry King moderated this debate, and it was interesting. Ollie North actually walked out of the debate because I had indictment papers that Costa Rica had on Ollie North. He couldn't go back to the country.
Amazing.
But let me tell you real quick, funny story. Dick Gregory, we got arrested. The CIA arrested us. I think twice they arrested us. And one of the arrests, and only Dick Gregory could come up with this. He said, before we go back to the CIA, get some of this yellow crime tape and also get me a bag of flour. I said, what? Okay, so we go to the gate of the CIA. They were going to wait us out till it was dark. They weren't going to arrest us. And what we did was he said, let's stretch the crime tape in front of the gate of the CIA. And we did. So you had this yellow crime tape that said crime scene. And then he said, do you have that bag of flour? I said, yeah. He said, okay, here. Spread the flour in front of the gate. And we did. Well, they brought out dogs to sniff the flour. And Dick said, Joe, the only thing those dogs are going to be able to do with that is make biscuits. I mean,
as if it was like cocaine. Man, I miss Dick Gregory, too. I traveled with him across Europe. We spent time in Germany. We traveled to Uganda together. He was such a wonderful man. And I know he was one of your closest friends.
And I tell you, when I decided to do the hunger strike, that he was the one I thought of. Yeah. I know I hear your music, but I got to tell you, it took 11 years to do this, and you motivated me to do this. You kept saying, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. I just didn't know how difficult
Well, you did a brilliant job.
I want to thank you for motivating me.
Well, thank you, Joe. You did a brilliant job. Hang on just a second.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The book is Radioactive, a memoir of advocacy and action on the air and in the streets by the great Joe Madison. Available wherever you find great books. Joe, thanks so much.
Thank you.